What's up, everybody? It's Eon here, and welcome to my review of Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice. I know I usually don't do movie reviews, but it's Batman vs. Superman. I mean, I just had to watch it and say something about it. So, here we go. Now, I will keep this review spoiler-free, so if you haven't watched the movie, feel free to watch this. I won't spoil anything major. I'll talk about certain plot elements, but nothing that will spoil anything you haven't already seen. So, without further ado, let's dive right into it. Now, I've got to say, I've been waiting for this movie since I was a kid, pretty much, because I've always wanted to see Batman and Superman duke it out in live-action format on screen, and we finally got to see that. And I guess the question in everyone's mind is, was it worth it? Is Batman vs. Superman a good movie? Does it live up to expectations? And unfortunately, my answer to that question is no. Now, I did go into this movie with an open mind, despite what the critics were saying. There was a lot of negative reception towards this movie before I watched it, but I decided to ignore all that. I was really sure that I was going to enjoy this movie regardless, but the fact of the matter is that overall, I didn't. Although there were some great moments in there, overall, I thought it was actually a mediocre movie. The biggest problem I had with this movie is the story. That's sort of the main critical dispute over this movie. A lot of people just didn't enjoy the story, and to be honest, neither did I. It simply tries to tell way too much, and it tells it too sporadically. There's just no focus, and just scenes start shifting way too fast. There's just no flow to this movie. Things become pretty unintelligible at some points, and there are these random dream sequences that occasionally randomly pop in, and those are really bad. I don't know why they're there in the first place. They don't really add anything to the story. They're just sort of random. It just makes no sense. I don't get the dream sequences at all. And there's just a lot of elements like that in the movie that just could have been left out that would have made this a tighter and just a better package. Now, I will say that the first half of the movie raises a lot of really interesting questions and dilemmas regarding just the presence of figures like Superman, this godlike being, this alien godlike being, and the presence of people like Batman, who is this brutal vigilante just going around and bending the law to his own will, sort of delivering his own brand of justice. And all of that, I think, had so much potential. I loved that setup, but in the end, it all ended up being kind of boring and drab. It was very political and impersonal, and it was just kind of glossed over, and in the end, none of that really ended up mattering. Seriously, a lot of the dilemmas are just sort of forgotten in favor of a big epic final confrontation, which was cool to look at, but in terms of substance, it just didn't really do the movie any favors. One example that I'll give is the notion that Superman's presence on planet Earth is more destructive than it is productive, I suppose. His presence has caused the vast destruction of a city. It's killed a lot of people, and not necessarily his fault directly, but he's brought all these threats, and just the fact that such a being exists, and whether he truly belongs on Earth, whether he's more of a danger than he is a help to society, just dilemmas like that I thought were a really interesting setup. And this is just a major topic that encompasses the entire first half of the film and sets up the motivation for why Batman wants to take down Superman. But the funny thing is that by the end of the movie, all of that just doesn't matter, because there's the same kind of destruction that you see in Man of Steel. It's not quite to that degree, because the movie occasionally sort of lets you know, oh, this area is uninhabited, so it's okay to cause all this destruction. But there's still a shit ton of destruction, and there is enough destruction in populated areas that the topic still becomes relevant, and yet it's sort of glossed over by the end, because at that point it's just all about this epic battle and defeating this enemy. But the topic is sort of forgotten, despite the fact that it seems very much relevant, especially with the amount of destruction that does occur in this movie. Again, not quite the level of Man of Steel. I don't think quite as many people die in this as they do in Man of Steel, but there's still enough destruction that the topic should still be relevant, and yet, again, it's just sort of forgotten by the end of the movie. And that's just one of many examples. There's just a lot of things that are just sort of touched upon, but never really fully fleshed out. So overall, the first half of the movie, while it raises some interesting questions and dilemmas, overall, it's just kind of boring, ineffective, and kind of meh. I was legitimately bored, which I never thought I would say for a movie with the names Batman and Superman thrown in there. I was surprised. Fortunately, things do begin to pick up once that, after that Senate hearing happens, and those who've watched the movie will know what I mean. I won't say anything beyond that. But there is a certain moment in the movie where things really start to pick up and build up to the epic confrontation between Superman and Batman. Unfortunately, even the battle between Batman and Superman was somewhat underwhelming. Don't get me wrong, it looks really cool. There's a lot of cool moments in there, but I think the battle itself lasted a little too short. I think it was too small a part of a movie called Batman v Superman. And it wasn't quite as epic as I expected it to be. There wasn't enough of Batman v Superman in this movie. And I think part of the reason why some of these battles lost their effectiveness is because the trailers, unfortunately, pretty much spoiled all of the cool sequences in this movie. If you've watched all the trailers of Batman v Superman, then there's gonna be like no surprises. There is a glimpse of pretty much every major battle scene in Batman v Superman, so there is nothing really surprising or no wow factor to some of the battle sequences because you've kind of already seen bits and pieces of it. And again, the battle between Batman and Superman was still really fun to watch. It was really cool to see brought to life in such a manner, in such an effective manner. And you know, Zack Snyder, he does a lot of visual things right. I think he has a lot of style in terms of visuals, and he certainly brings a lot of that out in the fight sequences. And it was just really awesome to see these two duking it out. But again, just the trailers showed too much, and as a result, no surprises, no true wow factor, and just really just short-lived. I wish there would have been more of Batman v Superman. It really is just that one scene, and that's pretty much it for the epic encounter. It doesn't go beyond that, at least in terms of them physically fighting it out. I also wasn't a fan of the setup to the battle. I expected their battle to stem from, their different ideals and the various dilemmas that the movie sets up. I thought that would be the central element to why they end up duking it out in the end, but it wasn't that at all. Like other plot elements, that stuff becomes irrelevant because it's actually Lex Luthor who sort of puppeteers everything so that Batman and Superman get to fight each other. I won't go into specifics, but suffice to say that it's just Lex Luthor's plan, and in the end, the different ideals and the dilemmas don't add much to why Batman and Superman end up fighting each other, so it just feels like the battle wasn't earned. Because of making Lex Luthor the center of that rivalry, the battle I didn't feel it like it happened organically. It just felt kind of forced and cheap. And of course, after the battle, they make up as spoiled by the trailers. But even that reconciliation isn't all that good. It isn't well set up. It isn't well told, because it just sort of happens. They battle it out, the battle ends, and then there's like no talk, there's no communication. It's just sort of like, oh, it was Lex Luthor. All right, well, we're friends. And that's it. Literally, it glosses over the entire reconciliation part of that Batman v Superman rivalry within the movie. It just felt like, bam, in your face, out of nowhere. It just felt like their sudden friendship wasn't earned. So we got a problem with the setup to the battle and the fallout of the battle. And again, while the battle itself was really cool to watch, it was not as surprising because of the trailers, and it was just short-lived, and it's just that one sequence where we get to see the two duke it out. And after they become friends, the Trinity eventually end up gathering together, and then in comes Doomsday, and All I'll say about Doomsday is that he's basically a big-ass excuse for the Trinity to come together and team up and just do something together. That's pretty much all Doomsday is. He's not really like a compelling villain. He's just there as an excuse to bring the three together, and maybe that's enough of an excuse for most people. I certainly loved seeing the Trinity duking it out together. So while Doomsday wasn't necessarily a compelling villain, or I wouldn't even say that he was a necessary villain, he did bring the Trinity together, and seeing those three fight together was undeniably freaking awesome and seriously badass. Just keep in mind that Doomsday is nothing more than a giant thing for the Trinity to team up against. That's it. And that's just the thing about Batman v Superman. Just as an overall package, it is mediocre. I'm sorry, I don't know how else to put it. It's a mediocre overall package, but it does feature some great individual moments. And on the topic of individual, let's just talk about each of the Trinity characters individually. So Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. I want to just quickly break them down. Let me start off by saying that Batman is definitely the best part of Batman v Superman. I think Ben Affleck played Batman for the most part, spot on. I think his physicality was spot on. And I think for the most part, he did a really good job just acting the part. I think he did a good job as the playboy billionaire. And he had a lot of great Batman moments as well. And I don't know, I guess the guy just feels right at home in the cape and cowl. I will say this though, if you expected this Batman to follow the no killing rule, take that shit and throw it out the window, launch it to space, and send it to fucking oblivion, to fucking Kingdom Come, cause this Batman brutalizes everything that comes in his path. I swear to God, on multiple occasions, I thought I was watching the Punisher in Batman's suit rather than Batman. So if you are devoted to that aspect of Batman, that he doesn't kill when he doesn't need to and stuff like that, you might be disappointed with this iteration of Batman. Now, me personally, I decided to ignore that aspect and just take this Batman for what it was. And when you ignore that aspect, there are some freaking awesome moments to see in Batman v Superman. Batman undoubtedly has the best action sequences in the entire movie. There's one scene in particular where he just brutalizes dudes Arkham style, and you guys know what I'm talking about if you've seen the trailers. It's that sequence, and unfortunately, again, the trailers spoiled that part of the movie. It was such a cool part of the movie that they spoiled a significant chunk of. It's not the full sequence in the trailer, but I still wish that part would have been left out completely because the full sequence is phenomenal. It is mind-blowing. My jaw dropped in that one sequence. It doesn't last too long, but holy shit, Batman kicked some major ass. It was just pure awesome. It was an orgasmic Batman scene. But again, with the trailers, it sort of eliminates the element of surprise, but there was enough awesomeness in that scene that you will freaking love it. But yeah, Ben Affleck gives Batman this sort of really high-end psychotic edge that I haven't quite seen in a live-action Batman film to date. It's really interesting. I don't know if it will be something that will win over everyone. I think a lot of people will find that really interesting and something to appreciate. Others might not like it quite as much. Me personally, I really loved Ben Affleck's Batman, but I think the brutality and psychotic aspects of him were taken a level too high. I think they could have pulled down a little on that, but overall, I thought the Batman scenes were phenomenal, all of them. So yeah, Batman, best part of the movie, no question. And then we have Superman, and while I like the idea of his arc, and I guess it's sort of a similar arc to Man of Steel. You know, he's dealing with a world divided by his presence. Some say he's a god, a hero that they need. Others say that he's more of a destructive force than anything else. And Batman v Superman sort of shows Clark Kent trying to deal with that. And I think it's an interesting concept. But unfortunately, Henry Cavill's performance is just sort of drab and boring and uninteresting. And frankly, Superman just looks depressed for most of the film, and it's not like I blame him, but it doesn't make for a fun Superman to watch on screen. It's depressing. It's just drab and I don't know. Superman just wasn't interesting to watch. And unlike Batman, Superman doesn't really have any standout solo sequences, in my opinion. From what I recall, there's nothing of just Superman that blows your mind like with Batman. I mean, you see some montages of him saving the day, lifting the pot in the rocket and saving people from burning houses and stuff, but nothing truly stand out like with Batman. So while Superman was on the receiving end of some potentially really interesting dilemmas and themes, he just wasn't terribly interesting, and he definitely felt secondary to Batman, which might explain why it's Batman v Superman rather than Superman v Batman. But there is no denying that seeing him together with Batman or Wonder Woman or all of them together, that stuff, again, undeniably cool, just a comic fan's dreams come true. And finally, we cannot forget about Wonder Woman, and we don't really get to see much of her in the movie, so it's hard to make a sort of 100% judgment on her, but from what I've seen thus far, my first impressions of her is that I really enjoyed Gal Gadot's performance as Wonder Woman. She has sort of enough of that sexy, feminine elements of Wonder Woman blended with the badass warrior, and it's all really balanced together, and she just brings out a really nice performance as Wonder Woman. I actually believed I was watching Wonder Woman, so that's really nice already. I think this movie made me look forward to the Wonder Woman movie even more. But not much else to say, she was just kind of there on occasions, and she did her thing, and it was good from what I saw. One last character I want to talk about is Lex fucking Luthor, and I just don't know how else to say it. This character has been grossly miscast. Eisenberg's over-the-top performance is like a really bad imitation of Jim Carrey, and it takes you out of the movie. It just doesn't fit with the gritty and grim tone. He's just sort of way too flamboyant, and it's just bad. I don't know. It's annoying, and it's just bad. Also, I dare you to take a shot every time this guy talks about fucking God, man, the devil, any freaking mythology, anything in between. I dare you to take a shot. You'll be dead like halfway through the movie. Just a terribly written character who was terribly performed. I'm not sure if it's the director's fault or if it's Eisenberg. I don't know, but I just did not like Lex Luthor at all. Not to mention that his plot is incoherent. I honestly never quite understood what his main motivations were for doing what he did, other than this really weird, abnormal hard-on for things related to gods, men, devils, mythologies, and all this other shit. I don't know, and frankly, I didn't care. Now, Lex Luthor did have one standout scene, but the funny thing is that in his standout scene, he actually wasn't present. He wasn't physically present. And those who've watched the movie will know what I'm talking about. I think that was a great moment for him. But the funny thing is, he wasn't in the actual scene. So that tells you a lot about Eisenberg's performance. He's best at playing Lex Luthor when he's actually not there. And just to make a long story short, Lex Luthor was definitely the worst part of this movie, at least in my opinion. Now, we can't forget about some of the glimpses that this movie shows of the upcoming Justice League movie. This movie actually, it's called Dawn of Justice. So obviously it's going to show some elements of Justice League. And, they showed Wonder Woman, but they actually show glimpses of some of the other ones. And I won't go too far into it. Suffice to say that, yeah, it was kind of cool to see them. And, but it's just a little glimpse that was definitely kind of shoehorned in there just for the sake of setting up Justice League. Didn't really add to the movie itself. It was just more of we gotta set this shit up, and it was just more of a mandatory thing that they had to shove in there to set up the future stuff. Again, cool, but definitely feels like it was just shoved in there. So, Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice. With all said and done, what do I think of it overall? I think the title, Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, describes this movie perfectly. It tells you that it's primarily a movie about Batman versus Superman with Dawn of Justice, the Justice League sort of sprinkled in there. But like the title, the movie is overstuffed, and like the V in the title, it's underdeveloped with all these little story elements that are just sort of shoved in there and not given enough time to breathe. The movie just lacks focus. I think if Zack Snyder would have focused on just Batman v Superman, their conflicting ideals and their conflicting dilemmas and all these really interesting elements, if they would have focused on that, this could have been a winner. That would have made their confrontation just that much more epic, that much easier to be invested in, and not just sort of this fan service thing, you know? But instead, director Zack Snyder and writer David Goyer just sort of shoved the movie with all this extra shit that was just padding and completely, I don't want to say unnecessary, because I get that this movie's trying to set up the Justice League, but maybe they should have waited a bit. Maybe they were too impatient with trying to set up the entire DC universe with this like one movie. They should have been more patient, and they should have let Batman v Superman be its own good movie. Because this movie is just, it's so thin. It spreads itself so thin on substance. It wants to tell you so many different things with all these individual voices, but the voices sort of get lost in the crowd, so to speak. There's not one story element that is fleshed out completely and that you will sort of think about or be invested in, because it's there and then it's gone. And this is so quintessential Zack Snyder. He's all style but no substance. The movie has some incredible, striking visual moments, and the action sequences, they're really cool. They really are, and it's just a fan's dreams come true. And if you just come to this movie to watch Batman and Superman duke it out and to watch the Trinity come together, then you might like this movie. But if you actually want like a substantial story to go along with all that, especially for the first half of the film in which, you know, not a lot is happening, then you're going to be sorely disappointed. Again, there are a lot of awesome and epic individual moments, particularly in the second half of the film. But as an overall package, Batman v Superman is mediocre. It's just not good like I really wanted it to be. I really wanted to like this movie. I am legitimately concerned for Justice League after Batman v Superman, because Zack Snyder is also directing Justice League. And my hope is that Zack Snyder doesn't view all the negative reception as fans just lashing out with no intent. I hope he understands that there's a reason behind it. I hope he takes these criticisms seriously, and I hope he uses that criticism to improve upon Batman v Superman and Man of Steel and make a really great movie with Justice League, because everyone wants this movie to be good. But I mean, after Batman v Superman, I wouldn't be surprised if some people were concerned, because it's not up there with what people were expecting. It doesn't live up to the hype. And one more thing, next time, I hope they truly consider not putting all of the coolest moments of a movie into the trailer, because again, that for me spoiled a lot of the surprises and a lot of the wow factor of the movie that could have been had I not seen those footage in the trailer. So there you have it, folks. Unfortunately, Batman v Superman just, it didn't do it for me. I was very disappointed. Again, awesome individual scenes. Loved Ben Affleck's Batman, except maybe a little too psychotic for my tastes. But loved his scenes, especially when he battled those goons as shown in the trailer. I mean, that whole sequence was just, I loved it. It was one of few times in the movie where my jaw just dropped and I was just flabbergasted and my mind was blown. But as an overall package, I just did not enjoy it. I really tried to like this. I just couldn't. Now, obviously, this is just one man's opinion. It's my opinion. I would love to hear yours in the comments below. Let us know your thoughts about Batman v Superman. I know there are people who liked this movie, so I think a lot of you may like this movie, especially if you just want to see Batman and Superman duke it out. If you love the fan service and stuff like that, I think you will enjoy this movie. But if you actually want a good core story, you're just not going to get that with Batman v Superman. But anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Would love to read them and look forward to, hopefully, more future movie reviews. So with that, I thank you for tuning in, and I will see you guys next time. Yong out!